Well, this season picked up quick. Like, almost immediately after the disappointing season premiere, now we're pretty much right back on track. Because this is a really good episode, and it's especially really good if you are a lifelong fan of this series, and you will get all the references and all the cool little Easter eggs that are thrown in, because this is a fan service episode by every stretch of the definition. But that's not a bad thing. I honestly, think it makes the episode even stronger. This is a very enjoyable, very fun episode that we have to talk about next, and I'm pretty excited to dive into it, so let's do just that, shall we? What's up? What's happening? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Animaestro, which is for anything and everything animation. Welcome back to Miraculous March 3. Let's talk about episode 2 of season 3, Animaestro. Starting, of course, with the synopsis from Netflix. Humiliated at the premiere of his new Ladybug and Cat Noir movie, the director becomes Animaestro, forcing the real superheroes to act fast. Yeah. So, let's get this out of the way, because I know it's probably gonna be the big sticking point of this episode being fan service. The director is literally Thomas Struck, the actual director of the show and one of the show's main creators. This is pretty much him self-inserting himself into a Miraculous story. And where with most self-inserts it comes off very fan-fiction-y, if you get my drift. Here it's actually pretty interesting. He plays a really interesting character, not to mention it's very self-referential and pretty funny. And his motivation for actually becoming evil and getting akumatized in this episode actually makes a lot of sense, being underappreciated for all the hard work he does. Because, let's be honest, guys, the actors are usually the one that gets most of the spotlight when it comes to movies, so the director is usually the one that's pushed to the side despite all their effort. Now, it has changed in recent years, but that was just the norm for a while. Most of the time when people are talking about a movie, they talk about the actors or the animators. They rarely ever talk about the director. At least that's how it was originally back when movie criticism first began. So nowadays, though, the director gets top billing, along with the actors, and are given the recognition they deserve. So, this episode having that as the catalyst for Thomas becoming evil actually makes a lot of sense. It fits the story, it fits the world of Miraculous, and it doesn't feel all that forced. Not to mention, Thomas himself is actually a decent voice actor. Yeah, it is just his normal voice, but he has a nice energy to it. A nice energy to his performance. It's a little hard to describe without going into spoilers, but it is a really good voice performance considering the fact that the guy is, not a voice actor. Usually. So, that was pretty cool. What's also cool is that the actual Miraculous movie that is in this episode is actually the original anime pilot that got this show greenlit in the first place. Literally, the literal anime concept short that Jeremy and Thomas pitched to the big corporate heads at, I believe, Zag Productions, I don't remember the big name company behind this show, outside of Disney, but that's mainly just distribution. It's the exact short, and not only that, it actually got me curious about wondering if there was an actual Miraculous anime that existed. Unfortunately, no, not quite yet, but it is still really cool to see this nice little callback and seeing this unused pilot being used in the actual show. Yes, it took till season 3, but it's still really nice to see. Another interesting thing about this episode is that we actually see a temporary team-up between Marinette and Chloe over Kagami. Yeah, it's a bit hard to explain, but mainly it's extreme jealousy of both Chloe and Marinette that Kagami is spending so much time with Adrian. So Marinette reluctantly gets pulled into helping Chloe. And their prank's actually pretty elaborate. I'm not really going to go into details because it's a spoiler, but it's pretty interesting. Then we have the actual villain himself, Animaestro, this evil version of Thomas Struck, and it's really, really cool. Like, let's start with his normal design without all the transformations and stuff. We'll get to that. His actual normal design is really cool. It's a 3D model of himself, but all the colors taken out with the exception of a ladybug mask on his face. And it's replaced by a bunch of like hand scribbles from like a piece of paper or one of those old pieces of parcel that people sometimes write on, or artist boards or storyboards. Like, it's really cool, especially seeing it in effect in the episode. It's really cool. And what's even cooler is some of the transformations that this guy goes through, because all the transformations in this episode of this particular villain are all in 2D animation. Now, usually combining 2D and 3D is a very difficult task, and even if it's not done well, most of the time I'm able to admire the ambition. Here, it's actually done quite well. They have a lot of fun coming up with these different unique designs. And yeah, let's get the elephant out of the room, and probably another reason why I ended up really enjoying this episode, and why I picked this particular picture for both the background of this discussion and the thumbnail of this video. It's because that is a blatant reference to Dragon Ball Z. Like, same art style, same D design, and heck, even has a little ladybug kanji. Like, it's Dragon Ball Z. Heck, and at one point towards the end of the battle, he throws a Kamehameha at Cat Noir. He doesn't actually say it, but you can tell exactly what it is. It's a Kamehameha. And, I don't know if you guys know this, but Jeremy Zag is a huge Dragon Ball fan. So seeing that in this episode made me smile. And not to mention, being a huge Dragon Ball fan myself, that was also really cool to see. Not to mention, almost all the 2D designs in the episode take anime inspiration. I already talked about the anime pilot that got reused in this episode as the in-universe movie, but I mean more stuff like the unicorn and the black and white one are not from anime, but the Goku references from anime. The final, one of the final forms looks a lot like She-Ra from that Netflix reboot, and then it ends with an obvious callback to Sailor Moon. Yes, magical girl transformation and everything. It is a really cool villain and managed to really bring this episode up from obviously what would have been a 6 out of 10 plot otherwise, because, I mean, it's just Marinette working with Chloe to try and embarrass Kagami in front of Adrian, and it doesn't work. And then the director gets underappreciated, and it turns into a disaster, yada yada yada. Like, it seems very predictable on paper, but when you add all this different style and flair to it, it really just elevates it. And sure, the 2D doesn't always match great with the 3D, but when it does match great, it matches really well. And the fight itself is so good in this episode. So if I have all these praises to say about this episode, and not to mention I should have some favoritism for this episode because of the blatant Dragon Ball reference, why is this episode not quite great? Well, it's because, like I said, if you take out the wacky 2D visuals, this plot is kind of meh. Like, I feel like it's a plot we've seen before, just in a different setting. For example, Jagged Stone, who's in this episode. Just in a different volume of media, if you get my drift. So it does feel like a plot they've used before, but they do it in a way that it doesn't feel, blatantly recycled. It's not Megamind 2. I don't even want to sorry, I just made myself angry. Excuse me. Okay. Point is, there was a lot of effort put into this episode, and the style really elevates it from a pretty basic, overused plot. That's its big problem. And the other big problem at the end, and this is probably just a me thing, but I would have really liked to see, like, at least a little snippet of them actually watching the movie. Like, instead of just seeing them in the theater seats together and then cutting it off there. Like, have them actually reacting to what's being played on screen, which would be really cool. But minor nitpicks aside, this is a really enjoyable episode. I just wish the plot wasn't so basic. But again, it's very much elevated by the great fan service and insanely good art that's all throughout this episode. And yeah, a little bit of favoritism for the Dragon Ball reference, not gonna lie. So, that's gonna bring me to my final verdict for Animaestro, which is going to be an easy 7 out of 10. It is a very good, very enjoyable episode. If you are a lifelong fan of Miraculous, you will absolutely love this episode for all the nice callbacks to Miraculous's earlier history and the cute references to other forms of animation. But the plot is pretty basic otherwise, and if you're not a fan of the 2D 3D hybrid switch-up thing, then this episode's really not going to be for you. And also, this can technically be qualified as a filler episode because little to nothing happens aside from, well, Adrian being with Kagami more, which I assume plays more into later episodes in the season. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this episode in the comments down below. I'd love to read them. Let me know what you guys think of the awesome anime references in this episode if you've seen it. And stay tuned because we still have 3 more episodes to go before I call it a night. So, I'll see you next time for Baker X. Bug out!